Good morning, good afternoon or good evening everybody. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Recently one of my O-scale customers sent me some samples of ballast that he was planning on using for his layout, and he asked me to do some experimentation with it. And that experiment is the subject of this week's video. So without further ado, let's just see what the customer sent me. Here is the ballast that I've been sent by my customer. It is produced by a company called Brennan's. Here's one bag. It is designed specifically for O-scale. I have a bag of mixed grey and a bag of, well, it looks black. It says dark grey yard ballast. It looks more black to me. So I'm going to use the natural stone grey for the main line and the dark grey for a passing track. So I need to create a test area to use this, and of course I'm not going to use all of it. I'm sure this is way more than I need. Now I don't like using ballast and other scenery products directly from the bag they come in because it's easy to spill them and waste it. So I always transfer them to these half-gallon containers. I get a load of them from Walmart with grapefruit pieces in them, and I go through them probably about one a week. So I've got loads of them elsewhere in my workshop. Another advantage of this kind of container is that you can clearly see how much you've got left. And if you want to, you can even put lines down the side to give yourself a scale of how much you're using. Now the track that I have been given for this experiment is by Ross. It's a piece about 30 inches long. And as it comes, the centre rail is already black, and therefore about as inobtrusive as it is possible to make it. But unfortunately we have bright silver running rails, and those bright colours have to go. So I'm going to have to paint it. And I always do that with rattle cans, and then I'll just have to come back afterwards and touch up the centre rail. Now what I have here is a red oxide primer. It's what I always use for the first coat. Now this one's by Krylon, but there are other brands as well, and I haven't found any difference. This is good for the rails, and then afterwards I'm going to finish by dusting this camouflage. It's a very, very dark brown. It's almost black, and then I'm going to hit the ties from above with that afterwards. What I'm doing now is removing most of the paint from the rail heads before it has time to dry, because it's a lot easier to do it now than when it's dry. Well, I've given the red oxide a few minutes to dry, and now I'm going to dust the ties with this Rust-Oleum very dark brown. Note how this time I'm spraying from directly above instead of from the side. And that's all it takes. It's just a mist. It does give the side of the rails a slightly uneven and darker shade without covering them completely. And once again I remove most of the paint from the tops of the rails. And then when this paint has had time to dry, I will come back and I will hit the centre rail with a brush. So now that the remainder of the track is a satisfactory colour, I'm just going to brush paint the centre rail flat black, just to ensure that it is as inobtrusive as possible. As a base for this experiment, I started off with some layers of pink foam, a square of 2 inch thick for the base, and then some raised areas for the track bed, a thicker piece for the main line, and a lower piece about half that height for the siding. And the first thing I'm going to do with this is to give the outlying areas a coating of dirt. That way when I have the track ballasted, it's more like a mini diorama and it will have a finished appearance. So I'm putting a thick coating of full strength white glue on all the areas that are going to be dirt. You may also notice that I hacked into the surface with a motor tool so that it's not perfectly flat, because the natural ground should have some undulations. And actually I am going to go up the sides of the ballast shoulder, so I have the full strength glue and some dirt on it as a tooth for the ballast and the dilute glue to stick to. Okay, what I did next was I put a sprinkling of several different shades of ground foam on. Unfortunately, I forgot to turn the camera on, and as you can see, I've already done it. So for the benefit of my viewers, I'll just put some more on top of the glue, and it will soak in quite nicely. I don't want to cover up all the dirt, and I'm going to just call that done. And then tomorrow I can come back, glue the track on it, and ballast it. Well, I've now completed the base for this test. I've cut that one piece of track in half and glued it on at the two different levels using full strength carpenter's glue. The other tools I use for ballasting is a smaller cup from which to use a more manageable amount of the ballast, an old spoon, and a cheap 1-inch paintbrush that I've cut the bristles off short to make them nice and stiff. And then I will use my brand of scenic cement, which is basically dilute white glue. 1 part glue, 1 part isopropyl alcohol, and 3 parts water. All I can do on this now is wait for that glue, or that moisture to evaporate and the glue to dry. One thing I have noticed is that there seems to be a lot of dye coming out of the dark coloured ballast and mixing in with the glue and running down the drainage ditch. Now I don't know whether that will prove significant or not. I'm just mentioning it now so I don't forget about it later, just in case I need to. Well, here is the finished piece the next day, after the glue has had plenty of time to dry. It has glued it rock solid. As I may have mentioned while I was applying the glue, the dye from the darker ballast leached out of it somewhat. As we can see, it has severely stained the edge. And the ground foam is now significantly darker on this side than it was the other. I'm turning it around 180 degrees just to prove that it's not differential lighting in my work area. But I think we can call that a successful experiment. I was planning on painting the sides a dark brown just to give it a finished appearance, but I don't think I'm going to do that now because of this dye leaching out. Leaving it the way it is will be a good reminder when we get to the layout that we have to ballast the track before we put the final layer of ground foam on. Well, that's all for this week. I am going to conclude that I quite like this ballast. It looks pretty good. It looks to be about the right scale. It's easy to work with. It glues down well. It doesn't try to float up like some brands of ballast that I've seen. There was the one issue with the dye running out of it, but that's a minor problem. It just means that we're going to have to do the scenery steps in a slightly different order to what I'm used to. I like to get all the ground cover finished before I ballast the track, but with this brand I'm going to have to leave the final coating of ground foam off until after the ballast has been glued down. But that is a good example of one of the reasons for doing this kind of experiment in the first place. So I hope you found this useful, and I hope to see you again next week. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.